Welcome to another lore video, and I was debating whether to do one at all really, because it's a quiet time at the moment while we wait for the update, which should be the end of the month, which is also when we expect whatever the Stargoids are to arrive. There are now 8 of them, and many are very close to the bubble. I've included the links to the spreadsheet and the 3D map in the video description below, so you can have a look for yourselves and see where to go if you want to get a good look at them. If you do want to go and see any of the Stargoids for yourself, then be aware that around some of them, and particularly around number 3, there are reports of extremely hostile hyperdictions will shut you down and then shoot you to pieces. So just watch yourselves if you do go and have a look at these things. But really, there's not been very much going on. There's a few ideas at the moment, perhaps worth a bit of discussion though. So we know that 8 is a number associated with Stargoids. Their ships in the original game were octagonal. We don't know if it's got any significance for the Guardians. Nevertheless, my gut feeling is that we will find out more about both species as a result of these things arriving. If not when they arrive, then in the weeks and months that follow. While we wait for them to arrive at the speed of plot convenience, Galnet has been doing its best to keep us all talking with a selection of articles that between them discuss most of what the players are saying, at least in general terms, and seeding future narratives with a few ideas that we'll see playing out, I guess, over the next few weeks and months. Most of these articles are going to come across to regular players as gap fillers or statements of the obvious, and in that sense they are, of course. Players are always going to come up with multiple ideas far quicker than a team releasing a few articles a week. But for me, the purpose that these articles in Galnet serve is to highlight which of all the multiple theories and ideas that are flying around will be the ones that the story is going to take and run with, so they're worth keeping an eye on for that reason alone. It's very easy to get distracted by details and fixate on them and forget the bigger picture. But how these different things fit together is just as important, if not more important, than any particular detail, and there's a danger of fixating on details and getting a completely wrong picture of events by forgetting or ignoring the wider context of how these details fit in with the rest of the story. So analysing any of this stuff is always a delicate balance between finding the important bits and not going down the rabbit hole too much and ending up more confused than when you started, especially when there's no way to know something for sure, one way or the other. So let's have a look at the main themes coming out of the narrative so far. Cooperation and peace are the two biggest messages when you take an overall view of the most recent articles, at least amongst the people of the in-game galaxy. Whether this means a reformed Aegis or something else is left open, but the idea is now gaining the political traction that its supporters were hoping for, despite heavy resistance from the politicians themselves. There was a brief Stargoid attack in the California Nebula, but the event got a bit messed up. The article mentions disabled megaships and distress signals, but these are previously disabled megaships from pirate attacks a few years ago. There are no new ones, so something went wrong somewhere. It all came to nothing much in the end, with the non-human signal sources increasing for a while, then decreasing to normal levels again. And some people wondered if the Stargoid passing nearby had anything to do with all that, but that had already been and gone the week before. It does look like FDev did plan to do something out there in the California Nebula, and for whatever reason it didn't fully work. But if the situation escalates there for any reason, I'll pop over and take a look. But meanwhile, it's all quiet there again. The Superpowers, although unable to completely ignore the calls for peace and cooperation, have come down from their ivory towers long enough to talk about a couple of things. It seems the military are keen to work together, and it's the politicians who are the main obstacle, although not all of the military are in agreement either. It's not that cut and dried, but in general the military seem more into the idea than the Senate or the Congress or the Alliance. So And the Empire is still full on doubling down on its isolation policies. And this article with quotes from Denton Petraeus is hilarious. This man, who, when they were giving out brains, thought they said drains and asked for a small one, is living up to his reputation as a blunt instrument, and his claims are pretty ludicrous. We already know he's a no second chances guy, so considering Aegis to be history is entirely what I'd expect from someone with no concept of learning from their mistakes, or at least being privileged enough to punish everybody but himself for mistakes. And the Empire being alone, that's just towing the party line. But it's this bit that got me. I assure you, Senators, that we are closely monitoring Stargoid activity and the threat is currently contained. How? Since HIP 22460, the Feds and the Alliance have been attacked, but the Empire hasn't yet. And the fact it hasn't been attacked yet just means it hasn't been attacked yet. It doesn't mean they've contained anything. So this just sounds like asking for it, really. The anomalous signals moving towards the core systems are being tracked. Well, yes, they are. And you can follow that yourself by going to the spreadsheet and 3D map linked in the video description below, or you can visit the forums and Reddits to see the efforts of many players and groups with every move of every Stargoid nailed down since they appeared. None of which is going to make one blind bit of difference if they're a threat that we have no answer for. And just the ability to track them doesn't give us that. But should any Xenoforce encroach upon Imperial territory, we are more than ready. Again, how? We don't even know what these things really are yet, let alone what we can do about them. So, it did cross my mind that this could be some elaborate double bluff, and the Empire might have made some secret breakthrough in Xeno research or technology that they're keeping to themselves, but at the moment, it just looks like the Empire making damn fools of themselves before being hit with the next wave of attacks, and this is just the latest bit of pantomime before it happens. We can only wait and see if the Empire comes under attack between now and the update, and if they do have some kind of secret weapon, then, I don't know, some people might feel that's a bit Deus Ex to bring it in at this point, but who knows. So while the superpowers are squabbling and ignoring each other, and we might be getting an answer to a question that's been on my mind ever since the whole idea of peace became prevalent in the narrative. So it's all very well to say that we need to find a way to make peace with the Stargoids, but it's all just fine talk until someone works out a way to do it. And that's not going to be the posturing politicians or the people doing podcasts, but it's actually going to be real scientists and engineers and possible expertise drawn in from other areas, linguistics, history, maybe even cryptography, who knows. But it's going to be the experts in the game who are going to work this out, not your average Joe doing a podcast saying, hey, wouldn't peace be cool? And so, yeah, it's all fine talk, but who's going to make it work? Who's going to find a way to communicate with the Stargoids? Or even discover if that's possible? So in this article we see once again a mention of the Guardians translating the Stargoid language. One quote by a professor who says it didn't work before, so why would using it be any different this time? Dalton Chase, who doesn't see why we couldn't communicate with them, and we'll come back to him. We've only seen podcasters that advocate peace with the Stargoids, but here we see one who asks if it's already too late. Since we already tried to wipe them out twice and failed, is the time for talk already past? Would we want to try talking to someone who tried to make us extinct twice? Or would we just want them dead to be on the safe side? And Jasmina Halsey takes a more scientific view of seeing no reason why a completely alien species would even understand diplomacy as we do. But even she says we have to try, if only to show that we can be better. So, in the absence of something useful, like an example of the Stargoid language to try out, someone has to try something, even if it's just spouting gibberish and playing music at the Stargoids until they get some of it. If the Stargoids then decide that negotiating means flying at us with all guns blazing and playing Ride of the Valkyries, we'll have nobody but ourselves to blame, I suppose. Anyway, to that end, we return to Dalton Chase, who I mentioned in the last video as running for office in the Federal Congress and building a megaship with which he hopes to communicate with the Stargoids. A community goal ran for him and only reached Tier 1, but that was enough for the ship to be built, which is called the Kingfisher, and it is currently being fitted with all kinds of transmission equipment. Try the Blue Danube, you never know. Meanwhile, Dalton himself has been elected into Congress and welcomed by Felicia Winters. The Liberal Party itself doesn't directly endorse any Thargoid communication group, but many of its members do at least think communication is worth a try. And Dalton is so far holding his own against the other side of the house by telling them that wanting to find a way to communicate with the Thargoids doesn't mean compromising home security. Good for him. Good for him, shutting the idiots down early. Although Hudson the T-1000 must be grinding his liquid metal molars at the thought that he can't just shoot the man. Meanwhile, Azimuth are trying to re-establish themselves after their major setbacks with a two-pronged initiative to recover their losses and get back in business. The first is a trade CG, which will give them the permit for the Ambuni system permanently and allow them to sell their Salvation-modified Guardian weapons again. The second is an aggressive expansion into the Wandrama system to become a faction there and gain an asset in the system, probably a surface site. The trade CG is running alongside the battle for expansion and does not depend on the result of the war to succeed. It only decides whether Azimuth will get the permit and the ability to sell their weapons again. Only the war itself will decide whether Azimuth also gains an asset in Wandrama and what that asset will be. Presumably a surface site, because that's what they mention as being after. And groups like Operation Witch Hunt are probably upset that they can no longer cause Azimuth to lose the Mbuni permit, but because Azimuth will be a non-native faction in Wandrama, even if they win, their site can be taken from them and they can be kicked out of the system by players by manipulating the BGS against them. So to me, that's a good compromise. Keep Azimuth in the game because obviously they want them to. They either consider them important to the story or they don't think it's realistic that the company would just vanish like that, or for whatever reason they're keeping them in. They want them to have, at least for the moment, a permanent presence. So keep them in the game and let them keep selling their weapons to people so people can still go and buy the Salvation modified Guardian weapons, but also give players a chance to counter any expansion into other systems if they want to. So will the Superpowers finally cooperate when the Stargoids arrive? Who will succeed in finding the next way forward for the galaxy? Will D2 and Professor Tesro discover some practical way of doing it? Will the research of Palin and Ramtar into the Grelix contribute in some way? Could Azimuth, against all the odds, provide some kind of solution from their quarter? The pressure is on for someone to come up with some answers, and hopefully we won't have to wait too long to find out what the Stargoids are and what it means for the future of the galaxy and our role in it as independent commanders. I'll keep you posted as more comes in.